What's the purpose behind the marketing plan? You excite, you educate, experience, and engage. Let's do this, right? Let's do this and let's have fun with it too. To my first-time listeners, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate you being here. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Marketing Podcast with NDub Podcast, where I'm your host, Nathan Webster, and I'm excited to chop it up with you today. Today, I want to get into how Nike taught me why brand strategy is so important, why it matters, and why they have monetized it based off of branding and strategy, off of image, likeness, loyalty. Okay, so I want to keep this short because I have so much to talk about it, but I really don't have time for a 20-minute podcast. So I want to keep it short because there's so much more to pull out of it, and it's not applicable to everyone, but some of the fundamentals are. But before I get really started, let me say thank you to my worldwide listeners from all over the world tuning in. I appreciate your support. Continue to subscribe, share, download. And for my first-time listeners, thank you for continuously showing up. You may not have subscribed yet, but please do so. I hope this provides great value and application to what you are doing in your marketing journey, adventure, maybe trouble that you're going through right now. Working with small businesses, I've been blessed to help small businesses, but it was started with my small business. It started with my nonprofit, and that's where this podcast begins. When I said I started working, not started working, but I started to learn how a powerhouse super juggernaut like Nike uses brand strategy to monetize and leverage who they are and what they do. So when I started working there, it was 20 plus years ago. I was going there working at night as a security guard, and by day I went to school. Well, I went to school the whole time I was in my undergraduate degree, and I created, and it was just coming off of having a business that didn't work, having a couple of business ideas that didn't work. And then I started my nonprofit. And what Nike taught me, and there's 3 takeaways I want you to get out of this, okay? 3, okay? Nike taught me that first and foremost, you have to have an attractive brand people can trust. So, and number 1, having people having a brand people can trust. They named all their buildings after an athlete that is superior. They're phenomenal. Let's just take Michael Jordan, for example, before he started his own brand. Their buildings, their image, their likeness, who they are and how they execute in the sport. This is like in the 2000s that I started working for them. They were created, I think, 1975, Blue Ribbon Sports. Don't quote me on the Nike details. But first and foremost, they started with running with Steve Prefontaine, and Bill Bowerman said, we need to find an athlete. But they took that athlete to say, we want to ensure our performance is good, as in our product is good for this athlete, instead of making it for the general public. So they knew right away they needed to then, number 2, have a product specifically for a user. In this case, it was an athlete because they were a sports company. They believed they could make shoes better. Okay. Number 3, it wasn't until later on, okay, let me start back with number 1. They understood that the brand needed to resemble a person. Number 2, that person had a product that they were using, and it was bettering, I'm making up that word, it was for the betterment of their performance, right? So they started with track, then they went to tennis with John McEnroe, then they went to Michael Jordan, and then number 3 what Nike taught me is you have to diversify. And in this brand strategy, of course, you serve a population, you pick your clientele, you and then you have your product that you use very well, and then you diversify. In this day and age, and this is what Nike taught me, is that it is hard. And when I was learning this, when I was learning the concepts, I was not in the place in my business as in my nonprofit to really leverage any relationships. I started relationships, but what I started to learn really, like really, truly is relationships matter. And these relationships matter in regards to when, starting with number one, finding that one person or that group of people that represent who you are and what you do. Because if you don't create number two, that product or that service that meets their demand, their needs, number three, you can't diversify. And so next podcast, I'm going to talk to you why I chose brand strategy. But in this, what I learned, especially walking around campus from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. to having to do events, at the end of the day, we're all people and we want to do the best job that we can. And say these athletes, they want to perform at the highest level possible. So they're looking for the best quality product that's going to give them an edge over the competitors. And I'm like, why don't we think that way in regards to small business? Just because we're a small business doesn't mean we have to think small. So in my next podcast, I'll talk to you a little bit more of why I chose brand strategy and why that's important. But I just don't want to lose why and how Nike taught me how brand strategy is important. And the last piece to that is, when you found your avatar and you develop a value proposition that's right for them, and as you diversify either horizontals or verticals, other products that support that, it was a crazy night. I think it was like 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning when Warren Buffett, he says, look, I'm trading all my Nike stock, not to say Nike's not bad, but I immediately saw them come in, and you saw these cars hurry up, about 5 cars come in the parking lot and start doing damage control. And that's where I wanted to leave it at, because your brand, especially when it comes to figuring out where your money's coming from, you got to protect that with all that you got. It's great that you may have the right people. It's great that you may have the right product, and it's great that you have diversified, but the stock market is where they got their money, right? And is one of the places, and you got to protect that at all costs, no matter what time of the day. It's 24/7, especially now that we live in the digital era. This was before the digital era. They were there before the bell rang, right? So, or maybe it was when the bell rang, but I saw those cars came, and I'm like, oh, this is a big deal. But I didn't know how big of a deal it was. So don't ever think your brand positioning on the web, whether if it's social, if it's your website, just don't ever think that that it's not as, or it's not that important. It is very important. Like, please don't underestimate or undervalue how people take in your brand, especially when it comes to your money. Now, everyone's going to say something negative, or you might have a hater. That's different. But when it comes to the money, if it's messing with your customer base to where your value proposition and the way that your value proposition is supported by other products and maybe partnerships or sponsorships, be very careful, because that's what matters the most, is to ensure that you continue to have brand equity and the strategy that you have built, so it never stops, only increasing for value, not for fame or popularity. So with that, you heard it here at podcast, Let's Talk Marketing. If you want to hear something that's more specific to you, hit me up at info@nwebsterllc.com. Also, please don't forget to subscribe, share, and like the podcast. Leave a review. That will greatly help us out in regards to climbing the charts on the Apple Podcasts, or even other platforms that you listen to. If you want to share this on LinkedIn, feel free to tag me, or on Facebook or social channels that you are on, feel free to tag me. And with that, I wish you nothing but the best. And so until then, dream big and Godspeed. I'm out. What's the purpose behind the marketing plan? You're excited insight, you educate, experience, and engage. Let's do this, right? Let's do this and let's have fun with it too. To my first-time listeners, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate you being here.